So I've been talking to Louise for quite a long time about us joining together and sharing this information on the wild hunt, because I think it's really, really valuable to have some shamanic information about this subject, about this mythology that is known as the wild hunt. So Louise and I are going to talk together. We're colleagues. We work together, working in shamanic ways, and we'll just share with you in a minute a little bit about what we do, what our work is. So we work together. We're great friends, and we share this work. And the wild hunt seems to be a big part of some of the work that we share, isn't it? It's got a lot of the themes that you and I work with quite regularly separately and then come together with as well. So Louise, would you like to say hello and just tell everybody about your work?
So hello everyone, I'm Louise. So you might know me as Weaving Wonderment. So as Ruth said, I've worked with Ruth for quite a long time now. I'm a shamanic practitioner. And I would say that I'm an animist, and I have quite close connections to the lands, particularly around me. I'm heavily involved in ritual craft. I'm a death doula, and I do grief cleansing as well.
Right. Thanks, Louise. So I'm Ruth Cato, and I work, I feel like as I'm introducing myself this time, it might change a little bit. Let's see what comes out. I work with women, especially work with finding and refinding the magic within each person. I work also as Louise does, I work as a shamanic practitioner, connecting women back to their bodies, back to themselves, back to their sovereignty, and ultimately back to the land, and the land back to us. So working between the realms, between the spiritual shamanic realms, and that might mean, like Louise mentioned, animism. That might mean the spirits of the land and the spirits of everything, spirits of animals, the nature spirits, the spirits of the elements, and connecting sometimes, or maybe as we're about to talk, not connecting with humans and human energy, and how we can help and how they can help us, and building really good relationships there as well. And the main work that I do is I work with women in a year-long program. So we work in the shamanic initiation work, initiating women back to themselves and back to their magic. So I think it's really important that we've shared what we do, because as we were just talking together, it became really obvious to me that everything that I have and Louise has and our friends and colleagues have read or heard about the wild hunt comes from a very intellectual perspective, comes from a mythological study. And what Louise and I do, essentially we're oracles, aren't we? We talk to spirit, we talk to nature. And the wild hunt being, absolutely a myth or a legend, but also, as we have found, a very real myth and legend, something that does actually happen, and that is still happening. And Louise first brought the wild hunt to my attention, and then it started to get bigger and bolder, and I got more invited into that. So Louise, would you like to share a little bit about what you learned about the wild hunt, how it came to you? What was the process of that?
So we were doing a meditation or light language, and I tend to find that I wouldn't say that I have that I would call it like a spirit. I have a spirit, obviously, but the spirit connection. I'm more soul and more down in the ground than up. We have to have both, but I think for me, I feel more comfortable down in the earth. And so when we did that meditation, I was met by Pan and the Morrigan, and they were stood. I had Pan in front of me and I had Morrigan behind me, and Pan gave me a flaming sword. And I don't really think I knew any. I was just like, well, that's the strangest. Well, that was not what I expected as part of a light language meditation, but that's what I had. And I think I allowed that to sit with me for a while. I think it was about 2, maybe 3 weeks afterwards, I had a dream, and I was called in that dream to hunt. And that, I think the Pan giving me that sword seemed to be like an initiatory rite into the hunt for me. And I think I would remember when I woke up, I was really quite, that was just like the maddest night that I have ever been on. And I remember trying to find some information, and there was like nothing I could find. I was trying to work out what had happened, where I'd been. And yeah, it was very strange. And I think from there, I sort of kept picking through. I talk a lot of my dreams out to the land anyway. It's something I've always done. And that was one of the dreams I did speak out to the land that time. And I just waiting to see if anything came back, if there was anything there. And I think slowly I pieced together that I was actually I was in a wild hunt, and that's what I was in, which was quite phenomenal. I remember being at the front of the hunt. I remember being told to be at the front of the hunt, get to the front of the hunt. That's what I was being told, get to the front, get to the front. And there was, I mean, it was quite quite a mix of who was there for me. So I'm very visual. I always have to say that I'm very, very visual. And there was, yeah, Valkyries, and there were spirits, and there were dogs, and there was horses, and there was all sorts of weird otherworldly things happening and going on. And I was at the front. I got to the front, and I remember turning and looking, and there was Pan on one side. I think I had Artemis on the other. And it was just, I was like, this is just strange. This is just so strange. And so that was sort of my introduction into the wild hunt. I think when I looked back, there were several things that had run up to that. So the weather. So in my animism work, I work a lot with wind. I've sort of apprenticed to wind in some ways over the past years. And I noticed that the wind on that particular night had been really, it was like really strong. It'd been strong all day. It'd been really heavy. I'd gone to open the doors of the house, and the door had been blown back as if to say, no, you cannot go out. You cannot go out. And I call it the searching wind. And I say that you need to make sure the wind knows who you are, particularly if it's that big searching wind, because otherwise the hunt will take you. So there's lots of things building up to it. And I think my partner said he couldn't wake me when I was in the hunt. He couldn't, you know, he said he was just like, I was solid asleep, like there was no, you know, solid. I move around in the bed quite a lot. So yeah, so that was my first induction into the wild hunt. I think I've ridden a few different times after that.
Did you know what wild hunt was when that was happening?
No, not the first time. I hadn't worked out. I think because I've been given the flaming sword, I still sort of sat with what's this flaming sword. And I just thought I'd put that away. And at some point that'll become very clear. When I was in the hunt, I had the sword with me. So I was like, oh, that seemed to be like the what I needed for the hunt.
Amazing. So one thing that I'm really hearing as you're saying this is that, you know, we know you're a death doula.
Yeah. Yep.
So I'm really particularly noticing that you being called in to actually actively do the hunt. It strikes me as a very strong role, as something really potent. As we were talking earlier, I really wanted to make the point that I'm feeling like the wild hunt as a spiritual but also very physical in spirit action out here in nature is that it's to do with death rites. And how does that fit with you, Louise? Is there anything you'd like to share about that idea?
I would say it's definitely to do with death rites. I think it's death rites of human and land. The reason I say human is that I was psychopomping. If I'm on the hunt, it's the fast-paced psychopomp. So for people who don't know what psychopomping is when spirits get trapped. So they get trapped between this world and the next, and that could be for a whole range of things. But quite often they need somebody to help move them. In the West, in particular, we don't have death rites. We've given away our death rites. So I think sort of the past, I'd say like 500 years, 300 to 500 years, we probably haven't had proper death rites in this country, in the West. And so people generally quite often get stuck between those places. So psychopomp is what helps us move them over so that they are in the place of the well and wise, which is where we all want to be when we've passed. So part of my psychoplomp, part of the wild hunt for me, was about that psychoplomp and moving people over. But I think for me, what the hunt is about, it's about righting the wrongs, and it's about the land. Its focus is the land. So I'm clearing those people, those spirits, but it's about restoring equilibrium to the lands, basically. So taking back what has been taken, and it seems it's this rite of, I don't know if it's a rite of passage, I don't know if that's the right word, but it's almost like, it's a reclaiming of what's been taken, and it's a putting right the wrongs that have happened. And sometimes we've talked about things that have happened. I was talking about the white stag, and I think we all ended up not realizing that this white stag had been killed, and then the next minute we were all off hunting, and we were like, this is really weird. But it was about restoring the rights or claiming something back, is what that felt like for me.
Absolutely. So I'm just going to tell my story now about how the wild hunt came to me, and that so Louise experienced that just a really short time before I began to experience this. So we were obviously being initiated into it at the same time. We were sort of bringing it in together, weren't we? It was brought in. So I moved my work and my home last year to this piece of land that I'm on now. And just before we moved here, in the old workspace that Louise and I were working in and doing our shamanic things together there, a new neighbour moved in next door, and their business was called Wild Edric. And I was saying to everybody all the time, Wild Edric, what does that mean? What's Wild Edric? And I couldn't find anything. I thought it was a beer, it was like, I thought this is some kind of beer variety. And anyway, I thought, I just felt like it was important. Wild Edric. Why has Wild Edric moved in next door? I moved work to this place here. And where we're at now, right next door. So we're in the middle of the most beautiful valley on the Welsh-English border. And it's very wild. We'll get to that. It's a country estate. So if anybody's watching this, we're talking like as English as you can imagine. Very fancy shooting estate where they breed pheasants and they shoot them. And the shooting parties happen from right next door. And right from the beginning of me being here, it was really potent, wasn't it, Louise? This energy of almost an us and them, like this is happening next door. And how do we feel about this? Because we're working with nature. We're working with the spirits of those animals. We're working with the spirits of nature, and they're going out and shooting and killing these animals. So getting into some sort of okayness with that, or relationship with that, has been really, really big and really important. One of the first guides and helpers of this land that stepped in, and I rarely get names, she stepped in, very tall white woman, very, very white, like physically white all over, clothes are white, giantess lady. And she's been helping and immediately helped with bringing me in, allowing me to feel like straightening my back, making me stand tall and feel sovereign and like I'm allowed to be here. That sort of energy, like sovereignty energy. And she said to me, my name is Goda. And I'd never heard of Goda. I mentioned it to Louise as she steps in one day. I said, there's Goda is here. And she said, oh, that's interesting. Do you want to tell us the story of Edric and Goda, Louise?
So close in between Ruth and I is the Stiper Stones. So like a mountain hill range. And the myth is that Edric is the leader of the wild hunt who rides Stiper Stones, and who rides with him is Lady Goda. And they ride. I think he's like over 1,000 years old, and there's all this mythology around him. And the story is that one day they were riding on the hunt, and Edric and Goda passed by, and a farmer and his daughter saw the hunt or heard the hunt coming quite often it's said that you can hear the hunt before you see them, and that you should hide your eyes. You should not look, because the hunt, as most things, have been changed a bit by religion to say that they're going to hunt for sinners and people who are unbaptized. So best close your eyes so that they don't see you. And so there's a whole story around that based in the Star episodes, which is very close to where you are, Ruth.
Isn't it brilliant? Like, as with all of this work, like all this shamanic work is so, one of the things I love about it is that we're working with the really, really ancient stories. They are pre-Christian. They're pre anything that we could put together through pieces of paper and through books. So ancient. So to have those sorts of bits of information just come through and then be able to be correlated like that is really brilliant, isn't it?
And I think with the hunt, the wild hunt, it's not just in, I mean, it's all through Europe. There's stories, different stories, in the Norse traditions, or in the Germanic traditions, all the way through Europe. There are these really old stories of the wild hunts who ride. And I always think that when there's that and there's so many links to it, it's not just in one place, it's everywhere. That there's something in that, isn't there? There's some, some magic there.
Yeah, absolutely. So we could sit here and talk all day about this, but I think for me, the one little bit that I just want to mention is I feel like I'm being told not to say too much now. So I'm just sort of toning down all of the stories and all of the things I wanted to share. But I feel like the wild hunt in its energetic form is to do with helping right the wrongs. And for me, this is about, I'm asked whenever I'm faced with the wild hunt, with the energy of that wind that Louise mentioned earlier, but also with these sort of baying figures, bloodhounds, wild witchy type figures. Like there's this very sort of dark, fierce energy for me about the hunt when I feel them and sense them. What they're trying to do is reclaim and make things right again. And the most important thing for me is that everything I've read about the wild hunt, of course, comes from human perspective. And the wild hunt is absolutely, resolutely not human. It's working for the right of nature. It's working for the right of the spiritual realms. And more than any other being, spirit, anything that I've encountered in the shamanic realms, the wild hunt are really, they're not anti-human at all, but they're just like, get out of my way, human. You've made such a mess of this, you humans. Let us right this. Let us right that wrong, And we were saying, weren't we, earlier, that I'm often told when I'm faced with the hunt, I'm told sacrifice, that I need to give back in that moment. So I need to give something back to the land. And I think that if anybody watching this takes anything from this, is that if they're thinking about, or they find themselves faced with the hunt, or sense the hunt coming, that what they need to do, or maybe what they're being asked of, is to give back or get out of the way. What bits of, is there anything right for you, Louise, that feels important that people should know?
I suppose I agree with the sacrifice. That I think, but I think whenever we're connecting with nature and wherever we're doing land work, that we should always look to gift something, be that hair, oats, anything there's something of value to us. I always think that's really important. And I suppose in terms of the wild hunt, I think that the one thing I always say to people is, if you'll find that you're in the hunt, get to the front. I was always told that was the voice that was in my head in that first dream. Get to the front, get to the front. I think it's such a melee behind. You want to be at the front, so that you're there. But I think yeah, I think it's just going with it, really. Yeah, I don't think there's, but I agree. I think it's all around. It's restoring the land. It's restoring, rights to the land. I mean, everything. If you look at, if you look at how cemented in we're in, or fielded in, and I always remember the first weekend you were at your new house, and there was that hunt. Do you remember? We walked down to the edge of the woods at the bottom. The hunt had happened, not the wild hunt, but the hunting had happened. And we stood at that gate, and you could feel the energy of that woods that said, do not come in here. We are done. We are absolutely done. You could feel the energy, couldn't you, coming out of that gate really strongly. So I think also being respectful and, really feeling, is this for me? Do I need to get out of the way, and not just thinking that because we're humans that we have an automatic right? That's what I would think. For me, that's very important. Ask and wait. Is it yes or a no? And sometimes it's a no. I always say with Blackthorn, it took me ages to connect with Blackthorn, because I think the first time I sat there, it was no, don't stay here. So yeah.
And the other thing that's coming to me with that is this, is it doesn't mean that you're wrong. It doesn't, you don't need to make yourself small in that. It's just like somebody setting a loving boundary, just no, not right now.
Yeah.
And us, us honoring that is going to do so much good, and bring so much healing in that. It keeps, the thing that I want to say keeps coming, and then they keep shushing me. Like, there's so many things. Let me just see, is there anything else? Oh yeah, so Louise's experience of the hunt, when it happens, of the wild hunt, I just want to sort of lay out a few little pointers of the things we've mentioned, most of them already, of what happens before the hunt and during the hunt. So that searching wind is a really clear sign, isn't it, for both of us? I think generally speaking, this is a thing.
Big wind.
When there is a real searching wind, when it's like fierce but light and quick and strong, and it's the sort of wind during the day or during the night that makes you feel a little uneasy. Would you say? What would you say about the wind?
Yeah, I would say it's big. I call it the big winds. I just call it big winds. And it's that wind, for me, it's the whistle. You can hear, it's like you can almost hear them calling on the wind. So it's when the wind is really loud and has that real tone to it. That's, for me, is the searching wind. It's like, oh, that's the searching wind. And actually everyone in my house now knows what the searching wind is. That searching wind is coming. Yeah, so that's to me how that wind presents. It's like it's somebody's call. It's almost like I can hear the calling. I think it's, for me, it's definitely big weather, big wind, and yeah, that's for me how it starts.
Yeah. So the next thing for me is when it starts to get dark. So if at dusk or just after dusk, if you get a bit of if you get a feeling of feeling a little bit fearful to go outside, then don't. I think these are the moments that if you've had a searching wind and you can sense the unease for humans outside, then it is very much time to leave them be, leave space for the wild hunt to go and do their hunt, to do the thing and to right the wrongs. And then for some people in those moments, they will, and this is absolutely not your ego. So if your ego is going, oh yeah, I've got to get out there now and experience this, that is absolutely not the thing to do. But if you're getting the call shamanically, getting the call spiritually, and I can't list how that might look for people, so you'll need to know that for yourself. But if you get the call yourself, then as Louise says, probably in your dreams, you'll get called into the hunt. And the most important thing seems to be, as Louise has said and brought through, that get to the front. Because you don't want to be in the middle or at the back, because it will be scary. and it won't be a place that you can do anything helpful, I suspect, from. Are there any other pointer bits for you, Louise, with this?
I think when I was more comfortable, I did have a, you know, like I looked around, you know, to see who was there. But it's fast for me. It's fast paced, so I can see and I can hear, and then everything's very fast. So in terms of what's coming at me, it's all quick paced. Yeah, and that's how that comes for me. And I think if you just find yourself in it, just being present in it, I think is sometimes enough, and witnessing it feels like a really important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So Goda is saying boundaries. So is this about personal boundaries, or is it about honoring the boundaries of the land? I don't know. We'll just put that in there. And then just for me to share what the hunt looks like for me currently. So I've got little children, and Louise's children are grown up now. It would be interesting, wouldn't it, if you had been experiencing the hunt when your kids were little, to see if it was different or the same for both of us. But because my children are small, the nights that the hunter are riding to right those wrongs, perform those death rites, do their thing, I am wide awake, and I'm never wide awake. I am a really, really heavy sleeper. So I'm wide awake and my eyes are like pinned open and I'm like looking around like this. I'm not fearful, but I could be or would be fearful if I didn't know what was going on, I think. And I'm wide awake, and I seem to always have a hand on one of my children, either physically because they'll be next to me, or energetically because they'll be up in their room and I'll be imagining my hand on them. So it's like I'm supporting and protecting my children as that hunt go past. And the other thing that then happens is I have, since we've been working with the wild hunt, I've had hunting dogs come to me in spirit in the Shamanic Realms. And these are definitely dogs of the wild hunt. And when the hunt is hunting, they're not there. And then just as the hunt ends, they come and sit on the end of the bed. And that's very, very physical, very visceral, of like sweaty, panting dogs at the end of the bed that are really protecting us, and especially protecting the children. Because it's not that there's going to be anything harmful happen to the children, but I think when the hunt is riding, you know, they're taking souls, aren't they? They're taking the souls that have passed. So in any sort of shamanic work, if we're working with death, or if death is working with us, we're always mindful of the souls that are closer to the other realms, i.e. the youngest souls and the oldest souls. They either have to get out of the shamanic space that we're working in, or we have to put up lots of protection and support around them, just because well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because my brain would say that that's like a very superstitious thing, but energetically it does, that is needed.
Yes, I think we've had an experience where and it was very powerful that individual needed to move because of the circumstance, because they were closer to a portal, closer to the portal than what we probably wanted them to be. So I think it is it's very powerful. Yeah, that the space, isn't it? The doorway between the dwells.
So I think I'd like to finish with, you know, that I think it's really important to say that there's nothing to be fearful of here, because all throughout written history, the wild hunt has been a very feared thing. And all that does is put us into more us and them. And what we actually need to do with and for the wild hunt is make space for them and deeply honor their practices, because us as humans have, you know, maybe not us individually, but I'm being told, yeah, us individually, you know, we have overstepped. And the wrongs that have been done there by humans to the land and to the spirits of the land, you know, they need to be righted. And if you are like Louise and called into the hunt, you can be physically righting those wrongs in that way. And then for the rest of us, we simply have to make space and hold space for that. So that is honoring that wind, honoring those nights when the hunt is riding, and yeah, just simply honoring it, I think. Is there anything you'd like to share, Louise?
The only one thing that just came up as you were saying that is I do always light a candle if I know the hunt's riding, and I put it in a jar on the windowsill in the kitchen.
Amazing.
The candle unattended, but there's always one in that jar if the hunt's riding. As I think it's almost like something that I've done as maybe as my own practice, just to make sure that I'm called home to that space. As I'm, because I feel like I'm out of my body is how I feel. Although it's my dream spaces, I feel like I've left my body. So I always leave a candle so that I know that I'm to come back to that. So maybe just having something that can ground you back, if like even if it's a crystal or something just by your bed. I have a dream altar because I do dream work anyway. So I do have a dream altar next to my bed with lots of other things on it. But, just something that can call you back, I think.
Yeah, brilliant. So if this is speaking to anyone, if anyone has any questions or any experiences, you're really welcome to. I'm going to put this as like a YouTube video, I think, and maybe we'll send it out on some social media platforms. And I just fully trust that the people that are meant to hear it will hear it. And if you have any questions or any of your own insights, you're really welcome to either email Louise or I. I'll put our websites on it as well, or comment underneath and let other people know. I feel like there might be another video at some point in the future. It feels really important that we're sharing this shamanic perspective of the wild hunt, because that is essentially what it is. It is a shamanic energy and thing in the world. It's not simply a myth. It's not just mythology. So thank you so much for your wisdom, Louise.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Lots of love.
Lots of love.